Hey there, writing buddies. I'm Michael. Welcome back to another video from Mr. Swaim. Today, I'm going to be talking about religions and how they affect our world and our stories. In my fantasy world, there are multiple religions, and I've had to craft them over the years to know exactly how they kind of butt up against each other, what some people who follow one religion think about the other religions, and that kind of thing. So I've done quite a bit of world building and religion building, so I hope that with what I'm going to go over with you here, that this will help you out in crafting your own religions. The first thing I want to point out while we're thinking about building these religions is that not all religions are based around a god or deity. Now, a religion is a system of faith and worship. Those two things need to be prevalent. Faith, which is a confidence or trust, and worship, which is a showing of reverence. None of that requires a god, a goddess, a pantheon. It just requires a thing. That thing could be money, magic, dragons, a king, or a deity. In this video, though, I am going to be focusing mostly on religions that do have a central deity or a pantheon. I am going to touch a little bit on more abstract, such as magic and dragons, but just remember that your characters can really worship anything. The second thing that I want to impress that we remember is that our characters, they're always going to have their own god. Even if what they are worshiping is the exact same thing, that's like named the same thing, everyone has their own viewpoint and their own understanding of the religion. So while you might have a character who's sitting right next to another character and they're both worshiping in the same temple, their ideas of who that god is could be very different. All right, that all being said, let's talk about religions. I'm going to start by giving us some building blocks to work with. The first section is going to deal with deific religions. This is where we actually have a deity, an outside force that they are worshiping. Sometimes in fantasy, we are dealing with gods who directly interfere with the, daily lives of mortals. You can kind of think of like real world, the Greek gods, Zeus and all of them would literally come down. They would do things. They would talk with mortals. They would interfere with politics and whatever else. And it was all just for whatever, their fun, whatever reason they came up with. But by showing their powers to mortals, they are undisputed. They clearly exist. People have seen them. Their power has been shown as evidence. They exist. If we have this type of god or pantheon, then the only real question is obviously it's not going to be, do they exist? It's going to be, are they the absolute great creator of the universe? Are they the ultimate god? Did they actually create the race of man? Are they more worthy of worship than a different god? They clearly exist, but should I worship them for whatever reason that they tell me to? Those are the questions that the people are going to be having about this deity. In my books, the great creator of the universe is named Arendwar. Those who follow Arendwar are able to heal others. And so therefore, the power of Arendwar is shown. So people know that Arendwar exists. And, it's not a question as to whether the religion is real or not, since the god is obviously real. However, people do wonder whether or not Arendwar is the great creator as the religion professes. They can clearly see that Arendwar has power in the world, but there are other gods who apparently have power as well. So is this god really above the others, or are they all in line and this one's just claiming to be? Some people don't know. On the other side of that, we have gods who will never show themselves, and they will never categorically do anything that proves they exist. They might help a crop grow by adding a few extra rainstorms throughout the season, but while the believers will say, "Oh, that was our God giving us, more rain," non-believers will just say, "Well, it was just really a favorable year. It was just the weather happened to be good that time." So there's no conclusive evidence that God actually manipulated the weather to give the crops more water. Next, we have individual or group. By this, I don't exactly mean, a single deity versus a pantheon, although that does obviously kind of fall into this jurisdiction. What I'm really focusing on is whether or not, if you have multiple gods, are they separate and individuals, or are they a group that basically creates the ultimate deity? In The Legend of Zelda: The Ocarina of Time video game, the beginning starts us off with the creation story. We are told that 3 goddesses created the world together. Din made the land, Nehru gave the spirit of law, and Forer created all the living things in the world. It took all 3 goddesses working in harmony in order to create Hyrule. The reason that this matters less when it comes to a deity like Arendar, who is on their own, and more with the dynamics of a pantheon. In my world, one of the elven races believes in a pantheon. However, they accredit the creation of their race to one of them, which is Lanai, the head goddess. The rest of the pantheon exists as particular roles. So you have like a goddess of death, goddess of knowledge and magic, a god of war, so on and so forth. But none of those other gods or goddesses debate that Lanai is the head. And while those gods and goddesses have their own little sects and they have their own, worshipers, those worshipers even understand that Lanai is still above their god on the totem pole of the pantheon. But the relationship between the Legend of Zelda goddesses was one where they were a complete unit. And so typically when you would go into any kind of church or any kind of religious location, they were worshiping all 3 of the goddesses, maybe one over the others kind of thing. They were focusing on Lanai, they were focusing on Nehru or whatnot, but they were technically really worshiping all 3 because the 3 were a unit. A true deity is where the deity was already created before the universe was made, and they either made it themselves or they had a hand in it. While a raised deity is someone who existed after the universe's creation, so they were probably just a normal person at some point, and they were raised to a deity status either by, another deity or through some sort of magic or cosmic force, whatever it was, but they were raised up to that level. Typically, raised deities do not have the ability to create life. That's not always the case, but they might be powerful enough to, traverse other realms or dimensions, raise the dead. Usually they'll have some other kinds of powers that are vastly superior to even the most powerful of mortals, but you do get some sort of gap, some sort of distance that kind of proves that they are more than normal mortals. Let's touch on religions that do not worship deities. Some religions worship the soul of mankind. This could be something like consciousness or ancestor worship. In both cases, the idea is that the soul is the highest manifestation of life, and that it takes on its final form in the spirit. The dwarves in my world practice an ancestor worship where they believe that the spirits of their ancestors will rise up and sway events in their favor during difficult and traumatic times. And the stronger that individual was in their life, the more power and the more sway that they'll have in the afterlife when they're a spirit. Magic is something that is worshipped even in our world. But in our fantasy worlds where magic is proven to be real, people are going to be looking to magic for answers. Again, I mentioned this in my world building video that I look at magic as a science. And much like science in our world, people look to science to kind of answer those big questions that are too large to grapple with normally, right? And so in my fantasy world, a lot of people who don't believe in one of the deific religions, they will look towards magic to ask those big questions. Where did we come from? Why are we here? All those kind of, large questions. People believe that magic can answer those questions, so they will follow magic and magic practitioners as a religion and the prophets of that religion. A lot of books, including mine, do have cults and religions that basically look at dragons as the physical embodiment of magic. Dragon religions could be looking to either partner up with or maybe even tame dragons so that way they can reach higher levels of magical power. Or it might be a town has a dragon that kind of protects them, so they worship that dragon because the dragon, maybe they have a hoard of gold in the mountain, but the town doesn't know that, and they just think, hey, this dragon's protecting us, right? So they see this dragon as a benevolent protector, and therefore they think, we should worship this thing because it protects us from all of our enemies. Now that we have all of these building blocks to kind of play with, let's talk about how we put them together in order to form our religions. What matters most when it comes to religions is the values that they instill in the followers. These values are going to show up in our characters. And remember from my characters video, core values of our characters, which a lot of those can easily come from whatever their religious belief is, those core values need to be challenged. They need to be put to the test, and either they will stand firm and they'll, be more resolved in that belief, or they will crumble and they will fall away from it. Religious values are typically held closer to a person's heart because they rely on faith. And again, they also have some sort of worship involved. So it's really instilled, very ingrained in the person to have those religious convictions. This can lead to very deep conflicts between either, the character that has that religion and someone else who does not, or even just internal conflict with the character themselves. If they are experiencing things that challenge that religious value or just the religion in general, then those conflicts are going to happen inside. And again, those are some of the most impressive and most important conflicts that we can be showing our readers. Now, while I just mentioned conflict, it does deserve its own little section here. Since conflict is what our stories revolve around, it's very important to know what parts of the religion are going to be the most contested. What parts of the religion are non-believers going to look at and attack? What parts of the religion are believers going to look at and attack? It's often thought of that if a person is, a part of a religion, then they agree with all of that religion's doctrine, right? But that's not always the case. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, all of everyone's deity, everyone's religion is going to really just be their own. Even though it might line up very much with the person next to them, it might be vastly different from the person on the other side of them, right? So what kind of hot spots are there in the religion that we're crafting? Most importantly, what parts of the religion does our character question? Now, religion can obviously offer external and internal conflicts, like I mentioned earlier. Internal is going to be much more engaging as far as, because it's just on a personal level, right? So if you're giving us a lot of detail into that character, we're getting very invested in that character, then when they have this internal conflict occur, whether it be from any kind of source is great, but obviously a religious source is especially good just because of the fact that it's so deeply ingrained that this is something they have to dig very deep into themselves to really uncover. But other than, just internal conflict, it can also be external. This could be between two members of the church. This could be between, a believer and a non-believer. But this could also be, upscaled to large wars. The important part, though, when dealing with external conflicts is making sure that you understand the religion enough to where you're giving both sides a very equal footing. Because if you bring up an argument against the religion, but the religion isn't very well formulated, then the argument either for or against is going to have too many holes in it, and it won't really seem like a very good conflict, because one is so much more right than the other that has all the holes in it, right? So you want to make sure that you understand your religion very well, in the point that you could basically have two characters argue about it. Religion is one of the most powerful tools in an author's toolkit. Using it for more than just a splash of color in our world can make the world seem much deeper, much more realistic to our readers, and really engage them a lot more. Let me know down in the comments below how you craft your religions. I'd love to hear some tips from y'all. Subscribe for more on writing, and I will see you in the next one. Happy writing, happy reading.